Spotlight Tale. Shah Fazli. Morgan Roddy. Welcome, and thanks for joining Spotlight. This interview is going to be very special and different. We know that. Do you want to start saying something about yourself? Something different and unique, please? Morgan Roddy. I'm not sure how different and unique I can be, but I'll try. I was born in Canada and lived there until I was almost 14. When my family moved down here, bringing me with them kicking and screaming, I had no idea I would meet the love of my life here in Florida, in the United States. I met her at 16, and we have been together ever since. Shah Fazli, thanks a lot. Is your book about that love, or any close to that love? Morgan Roddy. Well, she had a lot to do with it. The main characters are two characters we worked on together, from stories we were writing in high school. Keith, Amron and Javier Estes have been around nearly as long as we've been together, but Undisclosed Desire came about as a result of me staring at the screen during my first year of National Novel Writing Month, and she suggested that I should write their story. So it's Keith and Javier's story, not ours, but she is in it mentioned as the lovely young woman whom Keith mentions as he is speaking with Amaroka's werewolf friend and manservant somewhere in Chapter 5. Shah Fazli, thanks. Tell us more about Undisclosed Desire, please. Morgan Roddy. Well, as I mentioned before, Undisclosed Desire is a result of my first participation in National Novel Writing Month, which have 1. Completed the goal of writing 50,000 words in a new novel in 30 days' time 4 years running. This year's book will be the sequel to Desire, but more on that in a minute. Undisclosed Desire is the story of Keith and Javier's romance. They meet during the mid-16th century in Seville, Spain, over a card game. Keith is a 300-year-old vampire who is wandering around Europe, not really looking for anything in particular, but he comes across Javier in a tapas house or pub, and is immediately arrested not only by his beauty but by something more. Keith has a lot of secrets, some of which you discover in Desire, some of which you'll learn about in the sequel, and he's never wanted to share them with anyone before, and the book details both his journey towards opening up and sharing those things with Javier, and Javier's own response to these new and undisclosed desires he has for another person other than his wife, indeed, for another man. Shah Fazli, why did you entitle it Undisclosed Desire? Any particular reason for that, please? Morgan Roddy. Undisclosed Desire is actually the name of a song by a group called Muse that my fiancé and I heard from a friend of ours who thought we might like the style. Turns out, it was the lyrics which fit Javier and Keith so well that drew us over and over to the song, so I used the title of the song as the title of their story. And Javier's fight against and toward Keith must be kept from his wife and from all the other members of his society, so it fit quite nicely, I thought. Shah Fazli, do you want to tell us about what happens to the relationship between your two main characters? Do they stay together till the end? Morgan Roddy chuckles a lot of people have asked me that, actually, although their questions concern the sequel, rather than the end of Desire. They don't actually come together and say those magic words about loving each other until the end of the book, after Javier's death. And yes, I'm putting teasers in there on purpose. Shah Fazli, thank you. Do you want to describe a few adventures in the book? Do we see a lot of blood, action and drama? What they are like, please? Morgan Roddy, the book is definitely rated R, but that rating is mostly for the explicit sexual encounters. It's definitely not meant for a reader under the age of 16 or 17. But there are some graphic parts, I should think, in the description of Keith hunting as a vampire. He does reacquire blood to survive, and I took a lot of inspiration from Anne Rice's vampires in that he follows their heartbeats, can read their thoughts as he can near the end of the book, where a quartet of thieves are following him and can choose to either drink their blood until he has slackened his thirst, which he usually ends in the human's demise, or simply take a little here or there. I suppose Keith's meeting with the vampire hunter gets a little graphic, too, but I'm not the best judge of that, since I prefer Stephen King's works, and anything less than his stuff isn't considered graphic to me. Shah Fazli, tell us more about your vampires, please. What do they wear? How do they travel from one place to another? How do they look like, for instance, please? Morgan Roddy Keith is a tall, slim-built Frenchman whose salty roots from where he gets the height and his blue eyes, apparently barely visible in his visage. My vampires are very humanoid in appearance. They don't sparkle or fly like bats or turn into mists and peek through keyholes. Here's a description of him just before he meets Javier. He drew some attention as he passed, for he was obviously not Spanish. As it was, with his tall, slim build and gardenia-touched complexion, he barely resembled a member of the Gallic blood which ran in his veins. His lips were a shade too thin to be described as sensuously full, but when they curved in a gentle, quiet smile that warmed his silver-edged blue eyes, they turned into a weapon far more dangerous to their audience than the deadly fangs concealed behind them. Undisclosed Desire, Chapter 1. Travel is done by way of normal human conveyance of the time, mostly carriages and the like, but Keith does note that they can move much, much faster than humans can. When a vampire runs, a normal human won't see him move, so they can get around as quickly as they please. Shah Fazli, thanks so much. Why do you write vampire stories? Morgan Roddy, I've always been interested in taking my own spin-off and write his ideas of vampires, as a couple of my fiancé's more modern characters have quipped that Anne Rice, she either knew one of us or has the gift herself and changed a few things like the ability to make love to protect the guilty. Shah Fazli, thank you. Do you want to read from your book for us, please? Morgan Roddy, most of my excerpts are very long indeed, but today I'll post one that was featured on Blake Rain's blog most recently. Keith, I care for my wife, Javier whispered. In my own way, I love Ophelia. But it is not love. She does not make me feel the way you do. I want to share that eternity, to explore the world with you. Not her. But I cannot abandon her. I can only damn myself for not being able to feel the way I should about the woman I married. Again, Keith drew Javier to him, pressing his face against the folds of his linen shirt. Cloth whispered, and he shivered as he felt Javier's hands win beneath to press against the cool expanse of his moonlit skin. Javier, my Javier, it is not up to anyone to be the decider of who they will love. No person, human or vampire, could ever hope to command, to control in whose arms they will fall prey to love's bite. Someday, you will find a woman who captivates you as much as I have captivated you. Now of that, I am very sure. He smiled faintly as Javier glanced up, angry denials coming immediately to his lips. You, with the fingertip, Keith silenced him. I do not know if I am as you are, as prone to enjoying the company of a woman's bed as I do a man's. I think I am not, but then I do not know. For now, I have captured your heart, and for now, that is enough for me. I have forged a bond with you that is unlike anything I have ever experienced before, my Javier. Amarok is my eldest and dearest friend, but there is something in you which defies explanation, something in your very heartbeat which called to me above the beats of an entire populace the night I entered this city. That call is impossible to ignore, and though our relationship will shift even as time ebbs around us, I will never, ever be able to forget the feel of your hands as they closed around my heart. Javier managed a faint smile. It was not your heart I was reaching for, you know. It was somewhere lower. Shah Fazli, interesting, thanks. Do you mind what people say about your book, and tell us what do people say? Morgan Roddy, I haven't had many actual reviews yet, but have been told by several people that if I don't put the sequel out within the next year, I'm going to have some very unhappy people tying me to my desk chair and forcing my fingers to the keyboard. One of my reviewers among them. Probably the best story I have to share about a reader's reaction to Desire was a story she shared with me that concerned a neighbor of hers. This neighbor in question is in her late 90s, but hasn't let that stop her for a moment, and when Mrs. Parker, the person who originally bought my novel, told her neighbor what she was reading, the dear old woman immediately asked if, since she herself couldn't get online to purchase the book, she could possibly borrow Mrs. Parker's Kindle. Well, this was allowed, and poor Mrs. Parker didn't get her Kindle returned to her until the dear woman had finished the entire novel. Her comments, relayed to me by Mrs. Parker on the possibility of the book being a little too erotic, perhaps. Oh, Mrs. Parker, at my age a good fruity story is as close as it gets. No, I wish I had more time to just sit down and finish the book without interruptions, and I can't believe that you know the author. If the other book is as good as this one, then it is well worth reading too. Shah Fazli, thanks. What is your tips on writing? Morgan Roddy, always write with music on. The surroundings have to be quiet for me to write. If there's people talking, watching a movie, etc., I can't concentrate well, but there must be music. Music inspires entire scenes for me. Secondly, never let anyone tell you how or what to write. What you write needs to come from you, for you and by you. No one else can write your words. Shah Fazli, thank you so much for being our guest tonight. It was really special. We had great answers from you. Hope to see you on our show again. Shahside Literary Bookshop Undisclosed Desire. Morgan Roddy, I had a lot of fun. Thank you very much for having me. Shah Fazli, to book your interview, join www.facebook.com/beinthespotlight. Spotlight Live Facebook interview with authors and readers. As an author, you get the opportunity to interact with readers. Ask for an interview by joining